The maintenance hangar at Fort Carson Military Base in Colorado echoed with jeers as Staff Sergeant Marcus Cruz threw a wrench across the concrete floor. The tool clattered to a stop at the feet of Specialist Emma Rhodes, whose oil-stained uniform hung slightly loose on her 5 feet 4 inches frame. "You're just a quota, Rhodes," Cruz sneered, his voice bouncing off the metal walls of the cavernous space. A politically correct checkbox the Army needed to fill. Nothing more. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma stood motionless near the broken-down M1 Abrams tank, her face a practiced mask of indifference. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast shadows across features that had grown deliberately unreadable through years of similar confrontations. Nobody came to her defense. Nobody ever did. But Emma didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. Because 3 years earlier, during a classified mission in the mountains of northern Iraq, an M1 Abrams tank under her emergency field repair had rolled away with no maintenance records intact. The 2 senior mechanics who had called her quota girl that day were dishonorably discharged after the incident. She had never raised her voice about what really happened. She had never filed a complaint. She had simply waited. And now she was done waiting. The morning sun painted Fort Carson in brilliant shades of amber and gold as Emma drove her weathered Ford pickup through the base gates. At 34, she moved with the quiet, measured confidence of someone who had learned to make herself invisible, to occupy space without demanding attention or acknowledgement. Her apartment, a modest 1-bedroom 15 minutes from base, reflected this sane philosophy of minimalism. No commendations adorned the walls. No photographs of military vehicles or fellow soldiers decorated the shelves. Just a worn leather recliner her grandfather had left her, technical manuals dating back 3 decades, and an antique record player that had been gathering dust since Fallujah. Since everything changed. She used to listen to Beethoven before the war, before the mission that cost her everything she'd worked for. Now her fingers only knew the cold touch of metal tools and the weight of decisions that had destroyed her career. Her colleagues often wondered why she stayed. With limited repair hours logged in the past 3 years and a service record that read like a cautionary tale, Emma Rhodes seemed to exist as nothing more than a token, a living reminder of the Army's diversity initiatives gone wrong. She ate alone in the corner of the mess hall, reading dog-eared technical manuals while others swapped stories of combat tours and near-death experiences. When she walked through the motor pool, conversations quieted, not out of respect but from the uncomfortable awkwardness of being near someone who had fallen so spectacularly from grace. Master Sergeant Riley Jackson, with his perfectly pressed uniform and 2 Purple Hearts, often remarked within earshot, "She's here because they need a woman in the maintenance division." Political correctness at its finest. Real mechanics earn their place through skill, not quotas. Yet something lived behind those blue eyes that contradicted every assumption. When Emma looked at an M1 Abrams tank, she didn't see mere machinery. She saw physics in motion, understood every bolt and gear, every system and backup system. While others repaired by rote and manual, Emma fixed things by mathematics and instinct, seeing patterns in mechanical failures that others couldn't perceive, predicting breakdowns before they whispered their first warnings. She arrived 2 hours before anyone else each morning, not to impress but to study. She left long after sunset, not for show but to tinker with the obsolete tank simulator tucked away in the forgotten corner of Warehouse B, the one deemed too outdated for serious training. "Why do you even bother?" Private First Class Wilson had asked one night, finding her there at midnight, running her 370-second simulation of catastrophic engine failure. Emma had looked up from the controls, sweat beading on her forehead despite the warehouse's chill. "Everyone needs a purpose," she had replied quietly, then returned to her task. fingers dancing across switches and valves with the muscle memory of someone who had done this 10,000 times before. Wilson had shaken his head and walked away, completely missing the significance of what he'd witnessed. In that forgotten simulator, Emma wasn't practicing routine repairs. She was solving impossible problems, developing recovery procedures for scenarios the Army's official manuals deemed unrecoverable. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Emma Rhodes was preparing for something. She had learned patience the hard way. Learned that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with words or fists, but with quiet competence that speaks louder than any argument ever could. The question wasn't whether she belonged there. The question was whether they deserved what she was about to show them. Most of all, none of them knew about the tattoo. Hidden beneath her left sleeve, it remained her most closely guarded secret. Not because it was against regulations, it wasn't, but because it represented everything they had taken from her, everything she had sacrificed. 3 years earlier, the jagged mountains of northern Iraq had carved ominous shadows across the desert landscape as Specialist Emma Rhodes guided her recovery vehicle through hostile territory. At 31, she'd already become something of a legend among the maintenance community, though she wore that title with the same quiet dignity she would later bring to her disgrace. They called her Miracle Worker, not for any supernatural powers, but for the impossible repairs she seemed to perform under the most hostile conditions. 200 emergency field repairs before her 30th birthday. 4 commendations for technical excellence. A classified incident where she had restored a disabled Bradley fighting vehicle under heavy fire using techniques that would later be studied at Aberdeen Proving Ground, but never officially acknowledged. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Miracle Worker, we need you at grid coordinates Delta 7. Captain Lawrence's voice had crackled through the secured communications channel. We've got a disabled Abrams blocking a critical mountain pass. High-value asset needs extraction within the hour. The mission briefing had been thorough, as they always were. Intelligence indicated a high-value target, a captured terrorist. Leader being transported in the tank when it had mysteriously broken down. Time was critical. Every minute delayed increased the risk of an ambush. Rules of engagement are strict, Lawrence continued. This is a stealth operation. No comes beyond this channel. Get that tank operational and get our boys out of there. Emma's night vision painted the world in shades of green as her recovery vehicle navigated the treacherous mountain roads. She spotted the disabled Abrams half hidden in a shallow ravine, its massive silhouette unmistakable even in the darkness. Her team leader, Staff Sergeant Marcus Cruz, approached as she gathered her tools. Make it quick, Rhodes. We're sitting ducks out here. But something was wrong. Emma surveyed the tank, her trained eye catching details others might miss. The way it was positioned, the unusual stillness, the complete absence of the standard security perimeter. Her gut, honed by hundreds of field repairs, screamed warnings. Sir, requesting permission to perform full diagnostic before attempting repair, she said, her voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. Cruz's response came swift and harsh. Negative, Rhodes. We have our orders. Get that engine running now. Through her night vision goggles, Emma saw what others refused to see. The access panel had been deliberately sabotaged. The engine wasn't merely broken, it had been rigged. Sir, I believe this tank has been booby-trapped, she reported, pointing to the telltale signs of tampering. Those aren't standard connection points. Someone's modified the fuel intake system. The radio silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Captain Lawrence's voice, colder than the desert night. Specialist Rhodes, intelligence confirms this is our asset. You will execute repairs as ordered or face immediate court-martial for insubordination. Time is critical. Time crystallized. Emma could see her future spreading before her in two distinct paths: follow orders, approach the rigged tank, and likely die in an explosion that would kill her entire team, or trust what her eyes told. Her refuse the order and lose everything she had worked for since she was 17 years old. She keyed her radio one last time. "Recovery team, fall back immediately. I say again, fall back. This is a trap." As her team retreated to safe distance, Emma carefully approached the tank alone, using every counterintelligence technique she'd learned. Keeping low, she circled to the rear access port, the one place unlikely to be rigged, and used a fiber optic camera to confirm her suspicions. The tank was empty. No high-value target, no crew. Just 50 pounds of explosives wired to the engine compartment, set to detonate the moment anyone attempted standard repair procedures. The aftermath came swift as a desert storm. Within hours, Emma stood before a military tribunal, her career effectively over before they could officially end it. She refused to reveal how she had known, refused to throw blame on faulty intelligence, refused to make excuses. The full truth would have exposed a network of insurgent sympathizers within the Iraqi security forces, sources so deeply embedded that revealing them would have compromised operations across the entire region. Emma took the fall alone, protecting intelligence assets and methods at the cost of her reputation. The dishonorable discharge had been commuted to demotion and reassignment, thanks to a few silent supporters in the Pentagon who knew the truth but couldn't speak it. But in the court of military opinion, she was guilty. Miracle worker became paranoid Rhodes, the mechanic who had lost her nerve, who had endangered a critical mission because she couldn't handle the pressure of war. The night before leaving Iraq, Cruz had come to her quarters. "Why didn't you tell them about the fiber optic scan, about the proof you found?" Emma had stared at the bare walls, already stripped of commendations and photographs. "Because then they'd know our intelligence network was compromised. More lives would be at risk. Better one career than a dozen assets." He had pressed something into her hand, a small metal case, unlike any standard issue. "From those who know the truth, we won't forget." Inside was a design for a tattoo. Intricate geometric patterns surrounding a single phrase in Latin, "Veritas in tenebris lucet." Truth shines in darkness. Below were 12 small stars, representing the 12 lives she had saved by refusing to approach that rigged tank. 12 stars that would later be etched into her skin, a permanent reminder of the price of integrity. Now present day crashed. Back as Colonel Mitchell strutted through the maintenance hangar, his chest heavy with ribbons that spoke of a career built on following orders without question. Operation Granite Shield would be the largest mechanized infantry exercise of the year 52 armored vehicles, demonstrating American ground superiority for Allied observers and potential adversaries alike. Emma sat on an ammunition crate. In the corner, in the section reserved for support staff and what Mitchell privately called the obligatory diversity hires. "Rhodes," his voice cut through the pre-briefing chatter, "since you're so fond of second-guessing orders, you'll handle basic maintenance checks and fluid levels. The real mechanics will handle the critical systems." The laughter rippled through the hangar like a cruel wave. Fluid checks were recruit work, the kind of task given to first-month privates. Master Sergeant Jackson added his voice to the mockery. "Maybe she can wash the vehicles too. Finally contribute something useful to the division." More laughter. Emma stood slowly, with the dignity of someone who had learned that reacting only fed the fire. "I'll handle the check, sir." Colonel Mitchell's eyes glittered with malicious joy. "Oh, she speaks. Thought you'd gone mute after your little breakdown in Iraq. Tell me, Rhodes, do you still see phantom bombs in your dreams?" The cruelty spread like infection through the maintenance division. But Emma had learned something important in 3 years of humiliation. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is preparation, and she had been preparing for a very long time. The harassment reached its crescendo in the weeks leading up to Operation Granite Shield. Emma found herself assigned to special duties that had nothing to do with vehicle maintenance, cleaning the tool room after each shift, taking inventory of outdated equipment, and filing reports that nobody would ever read. In the motor pool, her tools would mysteriously disappear from her kit, forcing her to borrow mismatched wrenches and sockets that made her look incompetent. Her name was erased from the maintenance roster and replaced with diversity hire in someone's careful handwriting. Technical readouts she submitted were tossed in the trash unread. Sergeant First Class Williams, the senior NCO responsible for vehicle readiness, took particular pleasure in her humiliation. "Can't trust someone who cracks under pressure," he would announce whenever she entered the maintenance bay, especially a woman trying to play mechanic. "Should have stayed in administration, where being hysterical matters less than filling quotas." One afternoon, as Emma performed preventative maintenance on a backup Humvee that would never see the exercise, Corporal Parker and 5 other maintenance crew members surrounded her. "Checking systems on a vehicle you'll never touch during the exercise," Parker sneered. "That's pathetic, even for you." Emma continued her inspection, marking off items on her clipboard with mechanical precision. "Just doing my job." Parker knocked the clipboard from her hands, sending it skittering across the oil-stained concrete. "Your job? Your job is being a living reminder of what happens when women think they belong in combat support roles." Sergeant Rodriguez, a man who had never seen actual combat, but wore his stateside service like a badge of honor, shoved her shoulder. "Pick it up." Emma bent to retrieve the clipboard. Rodriguez kicked it further away. "I said pick it up, Rhodes. Or has cowardice made you deaf too?" She retrieved the board and stood, meeting his eyes with a calm that only enraged him further. "Is there anything else, Sergeant?" His face flushed red. "I'm talking to you, Rhodes. Show some backbone." Emma's voice remained steady. "Would that change your mind about me, Sergeant?" His face twisted with contempt. "Nothing will change the fact that you're a coward and a disgrace to the uniform." That evening, Emma sat in her truck outside her apartment building, engine running, transfer request on the passenger seat. Fort Drum, New York, a logistics position. No more maintenance, no more daily humiliation, no more pretending that she could endure the constant reminder of what she had lost. The radio droned about tomorrow's exercise, how 52 of America's finest armored vehicles would demonstrate the superiority of American ground forces. She turned it off and climbed the stairs to her empty apartment. The refrigerator contained week-old takeout and loneliness. This was the life of someone who had already given up, who went through motions without meaning. As she prepared to sign the transfer request, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, probably spam, but she opened it anyway, and her breath caught. A photograph filled the screen. 12 soldiers standing before a newly constructed forward operating base in northern Iraq, holding a handmade banner that read, in carefully printed letters, "Truth shines in darkness." Emma stared at the image until her vision blurred. The tears she had not allowed herself in 3 years finally came, silent and healing. She opened her desk drawer with trembling hands and withdrew a small metal case. Inside the tattoo design Cruz had given her years ago, 12 stars caught the lamplight, coordinates she knew by heart, the exact location where she had chosen integrity over career. A slip of paper fell out. Cruz's handwriting faded but legible. "They lived because you stood alone. Stand again when the time comes." Emma looked at herself in the mirror, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the tattoo that adorned her left arm. The intricate geometric pattern surrounding the Latin phrase, the 12 stars that represented lives saved rather than medals earned. The woman who had been miracle worker was gone, buried under 3 years of shame and silence. But the mechanic remained, the one who could see patterns others missed, who could solve problems others deemed impossible. She tore the transfer request in half, then quarters, then eighths. Opening her laptop, she accessed the maintenance log she had studied every night for 2 years. A small anomaly in tomorrow's vehicle readiness reports caught her attention. Insignificant to most, but to someone who had completed hundreds of emergency repairs, who understood the marriage of machine and human error, it whispered danger. Fuel contamination, she breathed. They don't see it coming. She compiled an anonymous report about the potential contamination and sent it to the Motor Pool Operations Center. Like every other warning she had submitted anonymously over the years, it would likely be ignored, too technical, too subtle, from an unknown source. But she would be there tomorrow in the maintenance bay, watching and waiting. This time she would not walk away. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. The kind of Colorado morning that promised perfect weather to those who didn't know better. Emma stood in the maintenance bay by 0500, clipboard in hand, watching 52 armored vehicles being prepared for Operation Granite Shield. The mechanics walked past her without acknowledgement, their faces set with the focused determination of men with important work to do. "Rhodes," Sergeant Williams ordered, "you're on final inspections only. Don't touch anything else. Don't speak unless spoken." 2. Are we clear? Emma nodded, taking her position at the inspection station. Around her, the maintenance bay hummed with professional efficiency. Mechanics performing the complex dance of military preparedness. At 0700, the first M1 Abrams tank roared to life, its turbine engine painting the dawn air with heat signatures. One by one, they activated the vehicles, a demonstration of American armor that would be watched by satellites and allies alike. Emma monitored her diagnostic tablet, watching patterns develop that others dismissed as insignificant. The fuel contamination was building, exactly as she had predicted, but worse, much worse. The convergence of substandard diesel moisture, infiltration, and altitude variations all combined to create something the maintenance manuals had missed. Something that would turn 52 war machines into immobile hunks of metal in a matter of hours. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. The question was, would they let her save them, or would their pride disable them all? By 0815, the situation had deteriorated beyond prediction. Emma watched her instruments tell a story of impending disaster. The fuel contamination had created microbial growth, subtle at first, but building. The aging filters in the M1 Abrams, pushed hard through budget constraints and extended deployments, began to fail in cascade. Mayday, mayday. The radio shattered. The routine comm, complete engine failure. Backup systems not responding. Within seconds, the maintenance bay erupted in controlled chaos. Multiple vehicles reported simultaneous system failures. The contamination had triggered something unprecedented, a perfect storm of mechanical and material disaster. Alpha 3, engine flame out. Bravo 2, hydraulics failing. Jesus Christ, I've lost all mobility. Emma stepped toward the master diagnostic console, but Sergeant Williams blocked her path. "Stay back, Rhodes. This is for real mechanics." She looked him dead in the eye. "Sir, I can help them." His face twisted with contempt. "You've helped enough in your career. Stand down." The main display showed 52 vehicles in various stages of catastrophic failure. Standard recovery procedures were useless against this kind of systematic collapse. The mechanics were trying everything they knew, but they were flying blind against forces they didn't understand. Emma's voice cut through the panic with surgical precision. "You have 30 seconds before Alpha Lead enters an unrecoverable state. Your choice, Sergeant." Williams' face went pale as he processed the certainty in her voice. Before he could respond, Colonel Fletcher's voice boomed through the speakerphone from his position in the base command center. "Let her through. Now that's a direct order." Emma slid into the chair at the master diagnostic terminal, the system everyone ignored, the one she had been secretly modifying for 2 years. Her fingers found familiar positions as she activated protocols she had developed in solitude. All units, this is Specialist Rhodes. Switch to emergency frequency 142.5 and execute protocol Sigma immediately. The silence lasted 2 heartbeats before Rodriguez's shocked voice responded. Rhodes, that's impossible. You're not. Emma's tone brooked no argument. Less talk, more fixing, Rodriguez. Sigma, now trust me. The mechanics reacted with trained instinct, switching to the emergency frequency and initiating a protocol. That existed in no official manual. Protocol Sigma was Emma's creation, developed through 372 simulations of catastrophic failure, refined through countless hours in the forgotten simulator. It was the culmination of everything she had learned about mechanical systems beyond the edge of disaster. Only one person in the Army knew its full parameters, the mechanic, who had survived countless equipment failures in combat and never lost. A vehicle. The mechanic they had buried under shame and silence. Emma's fingers danced across the controls with the muscle memory of 10,000 hours. She wasn't directing the mechanics. She was working with them, through them. Her mind calculating 52 different disaster scenarios simultaneously. The diagnostic simulator had been her laboratory, and now it became her instrument of salvation. Alpha lead, purge fuel line 3, mark, level out. Reduce power to 30%. You're in a pocket of stable combustion for the next 42 seconds. Bravo 2, emergency bypass on hydraulics. Prepare for manual conversion. You'll have about 70% control authority. Her voice remained surgeon calm as she threaded each vehicle through invisible passages in the chaotic mechanical system around them. The maintenance bay had gone silent except for the whisper of someone saying, "She's fixing all 52 vehicles at once. How is that possible?" Colonel Mitchell burst through the maintenance bay door. "What the hell is Rhodes doing to my vehicles?" Colonel Fletcher's voice cut him off cold. "She's saving them, Mitchell. Now shut up and let her work." Emma used the fuel contamination itself as a tool rather than a threat, converting corrosive elements into temporary lubricants in calculations too complex for conscious thought. These were techniques born from hundreds of emergency repairs, refined through 3 years of solitary study. Techniques she had never shared because no one had thought to ask the disgraced mechanic what she knew. One by one, she guided each disabled vehicle through the maze of failing systems and chemical breakdown. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her hands remained steady, her voice never wavering. The final vehicle, Mitchell's M1 Abrams, had suffered complete fuel system failure. Both pumps dead, filtration systems fried, a $9 million paperweight sitting useless in the center of the exercise area. "Colonel Mitchell," Emma said with clinical detachment, "you have 2 options. Abandon the vehicle and lose the exercise, or trust me to bring it back online." The pause stretched like eternity before Mitchell's voice, stripped of all arrogance, whispered through the static, "I trust you, Specialist. Tell me what to do." For the first time in 3 years, Emma allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Kill all electronics. We're going manual override. Remember your basic training? Time to use it." What happened next would be talked about in motor pools for decades to come. Emma had 15 minutes to guide Mitchell through the impossible, complete fuel system restoration in a fully loaded M1 Abrams using nothing but mechanical override procedures. She painted pictures with words, helping him feel fluid dynamics he could no longer see on instruments, teaching him to read the language of metal and machine that few mechanics ever truly understand. When his engine finally roared back to life, in a perfect restart, the maintenance bay erupted in chaos. But Emma was already removing her headset, her job complete. She stood slowly, picking up her clipboard as if she had just finished any other shift. Master Sergeant Jackson approached, tears streaming down his weathered face. The maintenance report, the anonymous warning about fuel contamination, that was you. You've been protecting us all along, even after his voice broke. Emma met his eyes with the same calm she had shown throughout. Just doing my job, Master Sergeant. Around her, mechanics and officers stood in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. The disgraced specialist they had mocked and marginalized had just performed the impossible, saving 52 vehicles and Operation Granite Shield through skill beyond their comprehension. But Emma Rhodes was already thinking about her next move. She had proven her point, saved the vehicles that needed saving. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with the power she had just revealed. 1 week later, Emma cleaned out her locker for what she assumed would be the last time. There had been no official ceremony, no public acknowledgement, just a quiet understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The mechanic she had saved stood in the hallway as she passed, rendering silent salutes. She nodded but didn't stop, her business here seemingly complete. Colonel Mitchell waited by her truck, his posture missing its usual rigid arrogance. The Pentagon wants to debrief you. Your techniques, they want them in the official manuals. You could revolutionize how we train for emergency maintenance procedures. Emma placed her box of belongings in the bed of her pickup. Everything you need is in the simulator computer, Colonel. Password is the coordinates from Iraq. Mitchell swallowed hard. Why share them now, after everything we did to you? She looked at him with eyes that held no anger, only understanding. Because 52 vehicles completed their mission today. That's all that matters. He struggled with words unusual to him. I was wrong about you, Rhodes. We all were. I'm sorry. No, Colonel. You were exactly what I needed. Your contempt, the division's mockery, it kept me invisible. Invisible people can do invisible work. Sometimes that's where we're needed most. Mitchell pulled an envelope from his pocket. The Army wants to reinstate your rank. Full honors. Public vindication. You've earned it. Emma shook her head gently. Some battles are won not with power but with dignity, Colonel. I have everything I need. But as she drove away from Fort Carson that evening, Emma had no idea that her story was far from over. Word of what had happened was spreading through channels she couldn't control, reaching people who had been waiting years for proof of what they already knew. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number, but this time she recognized the voice immediately. Miracle worker, it's Cruz. Marcus Cruz, we need to talk. They met at a small diner in Denver, away from military bases and prying eyes. Cruz looked older, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. I heard about Granite Shield, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. 52 vehicles, simultaneous failures, complete restoration under emergency conditions. That was you, wasn't it? Emma stirred her coffee slowly. I just did what needed to be done, just like Iraq. Cruz leaned forward. There are people who've been waiting 3 years to clear your name. People who know the truth about that mission, about what you saved. But we needed proof that you were still the mechanic we knew you were. What are you talking about? Cruz glanced around the diner, then pulled out a tablet. Operation Granite. Shield wasn't random, Emma. The fuel contamination, the system failures, it was a test. Not for the equipment, for you. Emma's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. What? General Howard has been tracking your career since Iraq. He knew what really happened on that mission. He also knew that someday the Army would need its miracle worker again, someone who could see what others miss, who could make impossible decisions under pressure. The tablet screen showed classified documents, operational reports, communications, logs. Emma's eyes widened as she read. The intelligence network you protected, it prevented 17 terrorist attacks over the past 3 years. 17. The soldiers you saved by refusing to approach that rigged tank. 3 of them are now training specialized EOD units on counterintelligence techniques funded by a program that officially doesn't exist. Cruz turned to another page. The techniques you developed in that simulator, the Pentagon has been studying them for a year, trying to reverse engineer what you created. They can't. The protocols only work for someone with your specific combination of combat experience and mechanical intuition. Emma set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow you're going to receive a call from the Secretary of the Army. There's a situation developing in Eastern Europe. Russian forces are using some kind of new sabotage technique that's disabling NATO equipment in ways our current maintenance protocols can't address. We need mechanics who can think outside the box, who can solve problems when the manual doesn't have answers. I'm done with that life, Marcus. I'm going to Pittsburgh to teach technical skills to kids who've been written off by the system. Kids who've been written off by the system, Marcus finished. I know, and that's exactly why we need you. You understand what it means to be counted out, to have everyone think you're finished. The Russian saboteurs we're facing won't expect someone like you. They'll see the records, the demotion, the disgrace. They won't see the miracle worker. Emma stared out the diner window at the Denver traffic, thinking about 12 soldiers in Iraq and 52 vehicles in Colorado, thinking about patterns that others couldn't see and decisions that had to be made in the space between heartbeats. What kind of situation? She asked quietly. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in years. The kind where conventional tactics won't work, where someone needs to see the invisible solution, where the Army needs its miracle worker. That night, Emma sat in her empty apartment, looking at the tattoo on her arm. 12 stars caught the lamplight, and she thought about choices, the ones that had cost her everything, and the ones that had saved lives others would never know about. Her phone sat on the table, waiting for tomorrow's call. She thought about Pittsburgh, about teaching troubled kids to fix things. She thought about patterns in machinery that only she could see, about impossible problems that had solutions if you knew how to look. Some people got second chances. Others had to create their own. The question was she ready to be miracle worker again? The call came at 06:03 the next morning, just as Marcus had predicted. Emma was already awake, having spent the night staring at the ceiling and thinking about choices. Specialist Rhodes, this is General Richard Howard speaking. On behalf of the Secretary of the Army, we need to talk. 2 hours later, Emma found herself in a secure conference room at Peterson Space Force Base, facing 3 generals and a civilian she didn't recognize but whose bearing screamed Pentagon. General Howard, a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too many wars, got straight to the point. 6 days ago, a NATO mechanized infantry unit on the Estonian border suffered catastrophic equipment failures. Every vehicle, every piece of electronic equipment, all disabled without a single shot fired. Yesterday, it happened again in Latvia. Different units, same result. The civilian, who introduced himself only as Mr. Davidson, activated a wall display showing satellite imagery of the Baltic region. Russian military exercises have increased 400% in the past month. Their sabotage technology has advanced significantly, but not enough to explain these failures. Colonel Fletcher, the same woman who had ordered Emma into the diagnostic chair a week ago, leaned forward. Unless they've developed some kind of mechanical warfare technique, we don't understand, which means we need someone who can find patterns others miss. Emma studied the display. What does this have to do with me? Howard smiled grimly. Intelligence suggests they're using some kind of contaminant that affects both fuel and electronic systems simultaneously, something our current maintenance protocols can't detect until it's too late. You want me to find invisible sabotage? Emma asked. We want you to do what you did 3 years ago in Iraq, Davidson said quietly. See what others miss. Make the call that saves lives. Emma felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. And if I say no? Howard's expression softened slightly. Then you go to Pittsburgh, teach those kids to fix things, and hope we can figure this out without you. But Emma, may I call you Emma? We both know you're not going to say no, because that's not who you are. The mission briefing lasted 4 hours. Russian forces were conducting what they called routine exercises near the Baltic nations, but intelligence showed movements and mechanical failures that suggested something far more sinister. Traditional maintenance teams have been ineffective. General Howard explained. The Russians are using some kind of sabotage system that makes their approach nearly undetectable to conventional mechanics. We need someone who can go into that environment and use unconventional methods to identify and counter the threat. Emma studied the mission parameters with growing unease. This is a suicide mission. You're asking me to deploy solo into a potential conflict zone with no backup, using equipment that may not work, to find an enemy that's essentially invisible. That's why we need the miracle worker, Fletcher said simply. Because the miracle worker sees the invisible. The vehicle they showed her was unlike anything she'd ever worked on. A modified Stryker combat vehicle designated XM1296E, loaded with experimental diagnostic sensors and countermeasures. It was a test mechanic's dream and a field technician's nightmare. The good news, the chief engineer explained, is that the modifications give you capabilities no mechanic has ever had. The bad news is that half of them are theoretical, and the other half might fail completely under field conditions. Emma ran her hands over the access panels, feeling the subtle differences in weight and balance. How long do I have to learn this vehicle? 72 hours, Howard replied. The next NATO convoy reaches their operational position in 96 hours. If we're going to stop whatever the Russians are planning, it has to be soon. That evening, Emma called the technical school in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, she told the director, a former Marine Corps engineer who understood military obligations. Something's come up. I'll need to postpone for a few weeks. How many weeks? He asked. Emma looked out her apartment window at the Colorado skyline, thinking about invisible sabotage and impossible missions. I honestly don't know. Maybe forever. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of technical briefings, diagnostic tests, and system familiarization. The XM1296E was a temperamental beast, requiring precise understanding and constant attention. But slowly, Emma began to grasp its rhythm, its personality. On her final diagnostic test, she identified problems that would have been impossible to detect in a standard vehicle. The experimental sensors painted a picture of mechanical systems that was both more detailed and more confusing than anything she'd experienced. How does it feel? Marcus asked as they prepared the vehicle for transport. He'd been assigned as her support coordinator, the one constant in a mission defined by variables. Like fixing an engine with superpowers and a blindfold at the same time, Emma replied, closing the last access panel. The sensors can see everything, but interpreting what they're seeing, that's the trick. Back at the base, General Howard was waiting with final mission orders. You deploy in 6 hours. Target area is approximately 20 kilometers from the Russian border. Your mission is to locate and identify the sabotage method using unconventional diagnostic techniques. Emma studied the deployment plan. It was a masterpiece of calculated risk, inserting her into a standard NATO maintenance unit as an equipment specialist, using routine supply routes to mask her real purpose. On paper, it looked like a standard rotation. In reality, it was a high-stakes game of mechanical cat and mouse. What's my backup if things go wrong? She asked. Howard's expression didn't change. You don't have one. Officially, this mission doesn't exist. If you're captured or compromised, the Army will disavow any knowledge of your operation. Emma nodded slowly. She'd expected as much. And unofficially? For the first time, Howard smiled. Unofficially, every resource we have will be focused on bringing you home. But you need to understand once you cross into that territory, you're on your own. The decisions you make out there, they're yours alone. Standing beside the XM-1296E as it was loaded onto the transport aircraft, Emma thought about patterns and choices, about invisible threats and impossible solutions. Somewhere out there, Russian saboteurs were preparing for something that could change the balance of power in Europe, and she was the only one who might be able to stop it. The weight of it should have been crushing. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, Emma Rhodes felt like herself again. Time to be the miracle worker. The XM-1296E Striker rolled through the Estonian countryside like a ghost in the fog. Its experimental systems barely registered on standard detection equipment as Emma guided it across terrain that had become a mechanical graveyard over the past 2 weeks. She had deployed under the cover of a standard rotation, her credentials listing her simply as Technical Specialist attached to the NATO Baltic Response Force. The morning mist clung to the fields, turning the world into a watercolor painting of greens and grays. Emma's vehicle was one of 12 in the convoy, but hers alone carried equipment that might uncover what was happening to NATO's armored vehicles along the Russian border. "Phoenix, this is Watchdog." Marcus's voice crackled through the encrypted communications. "You're approaching the outer perimeter of the affected area. Last convoy lost all mobility within an hour of crossing this line." Emma checked her instruments one final time. The experimental diagnostic suite hummed with electronic life, painting a detailed picture of the surrounding environment. But what she was looking for wouldn't show up on any conventional display. "Copy Watchdog, going to passive detection." She switched to the XM-1296E stealth diagnostic mode. The vehicle seemed to hold its breath, absorbing data without emitting signals that might alert whoever was responsible for the sabotage. The Russians had chosen their operational area well-dense forests and rolling hills provided perfect cover for covert activities. But Emma had spent the past 72 hours studying soil composition, water tables, and atmospheric conditions specific to the region. If there was a pattern to be found, she would find it. 2 hours into the mission, her sensors detected the first anomaly. Not a device or signal, but something subtler, a disturbance in the soil composition that suggested recent manipulation. Emma slowed her vehicle, dropping behind the main convoy as they approached a small bridge crossing. "Watchdog, this is Phoenix. I have environmental irregularities at grid coordinates Echo 5. Permission to investigate." "Granted, Phoenix." "Convoy will proceed. Maintain comms." Emma guided her vehicle off the main road, moving carefully through the underbrush until she reached a small stream. The water looked normal to the naked eye, but her specialized sensors painted a different picture: microscopic particles suspended in the flow, particles that shouldn't be there. She activated the XM-1296E sample collection system, extracting water and soil specimens for analysis. The onboard computer processed the data, cross-referencing against thousands of known contaminants. "Watchdog, I've identified particulate matter consistent with advanced nanomaterial. Not explosive, not traditionally toxic, but designed to bind with diesel fuel and electronic components. This isn't conventional sabotage, it's molecular." The radio silence stretched for 45 seconds before Marcus responded. "Copy, Phoenix. Can you determine delivery method?" Emma studied her sensor displays, watching the patterns of contamination in the surrounding area. Something was wrong. The distribution was too precise, the affected areas too targeted for random dispersal. "Watchdog, I believe they're using the water supply. The nanoparticles are entering vehicle systems through cooling mechanisms and atmospheric moisture intake. They're essentially turning the environment itself into a weapon. Before Marcus could respond, Emma's threat warning system blared an alert. Multiple heat signatures moving through the forest, approaching fast, but that was impossible. Her standard motion sensors showed nothing. Phoenix were showing multiple contacts converging on your position. Do you have visual? Emma scanned the tree line, seeing nothing but shadows and fog. But her enhanced thermal imaging told a different story: human-shaped heat signatures, moving with military precision, somehow masked from conventional detection. They're using some kind of thermal camouflage. She breathed into her radio. Standard. Optics can't see them, but they're definitely here. Emma activated systems that the engineers had sworn were purely experimental. Sensors that could detect the minute electrical signatures of human nervous systems, regardless of visual or thermal camouflage. Suddenly, the seemingly empty forest came alive with Contact's 8 operatives in tactical formation, their outlines distorted by technology that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical research labs. Phoenix, extract immediately. Mission parameters do not include engagement. Negative, watchdog. I need to see what they're protecting. Emma powered down all non-essential systems, using the XM1296E's electric drive to move silently through the underbrush. She was operating on instinct now, following patterns only she could see, threading through invisible corridors between the Russian operatives. What she found in their staging area made her blood run cold. A portable device the size of a small suitcase connected to the stream via a series of nearly invisible tubes. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a contaminant delivery system, pumping the nanomaterial into the waterway that fed all the major routes NATO vehicles would travel. Watchdog, I have visual on the primary device. It's some kind of nanomaterial injector. They're not attacking our vehicles directly. They're seeding the environment with particles designed to infiltrate and disable our systems over time. As she documented the device, Emma noticed something even more disturbing. The injector wasn't just targeting mechanical systems. The nanoparticles were designed to affect the electronic systems in the vehicles as well, rendering both propulsion and communications useless in a cascading failure that would leave NATO forces completely immobilized. They're not just jamming our mechanics, she reported. They're creating conditions for a complete system collapse. By the time conventional forces could respond to the real threat, their vehicles would be immobile, their communications severed, their defensive systems blind. Phoenix, you need to return to rally point immediately, Marcus ordered. We have what we need to. His voice cut out, replaced by static. Emma was alone, surrounded by Russian special operatives in a forest full of invisible threats. For a moment, she felt the familiar weight of an impossible decision. She could run, try to escape back to friendly territory with the intelligence she'd gathered, or she could stay and try to stop this before it spread throughout the region. The injector system was the key. Without it, the Russian operation would be significantly delayed, buying NATO time to develop countermeasures. But disabling it would require getting close enough to a device she barely understood, guarded by operatives equipped with technology that made them nearly invisible. Emma smiled grimly, remembering Colonel Mitchell's words from months ago. Real mechanics make the hard choices. Time to show them what a real mechanic could do. She armed the XM1296E's experimental countermeasure systems and guided her vehicle toward the Russian staging area. Invisible against invisible, a mechanical ghost approaching an impossible target through a forest full of shadows. The XM1296E's systems locked onto the injection device with a tone Emma had never heard before, a pure, crystalline note that seemed to harmonize with her heartbeat. She had one shot, one chance to disrupt whatever the Russians were unleashing across the Baltic region. But as her finger moved toward the activation control, something made her pause. The pattern of the Russian operatives had changed. They weren't pursuing her. They were fleeing, all 8 special operators banking away from the device at maximum speed. Why are they running? She wondered aloud. Then her blood turned to ice. The nanomaterial injector wasn't just a sabotage tool. It was rigged, too. Self-destructive tampered with. A technological booby trap designed to eliminate anyone who discovered it while releasing a concentrated burst of contaminants that would affect every piece of NATO equipment within 50 kilometers. Emma had perhaps 60 seconds before the device detonated, turning the entire area into a mechanical graveyard and potentially killing her in the process. 60 seconds to find a solution that didn't exist in any manual. She studied her diagnostic displays with desperate intensity, looking for patterns that others would miss. The injector was drawing power from a concealed battery system, using a sophisticated timing mechanism to release precise amounts of nanomaterial into the water. But the system was delicate, requiring precise calibration and controlled environmental conditions. If she could disrupt the power supply without triggering the failsafe, Emma guided the XM1296E to within 5 meters of the device, close enough for her most precise instruments to analyze its construction, but hopefully outside the blast radius if things went wrong. She activated every diagnostic system, every electronic countermeasure, every experimental tool the vehicle carried. The goal wasn't to destroy the injector. It was to create enough electromagnetic interference to disrupt its control systems without triggering the self-destruct mechanism. The forest exploded with activity as the Russian operatives, detecting her approach, opened fire with silenced weapons. Bullets pinned off the striker's armor, but Emma was focused entirely on the delicate electronic dance she was performing. The specialized jammers had worked. The power transfer was interrupted, and the injector's control systems were beginning to fail. But the Russians had a backup plan. One of the camouflaged operatives broke cover and sprinted toward the device, clearly intending to trigger it manually. Emma tracked the approaching figure through her enhanced optics, calculating trajectories and probabilities with the speed born of hundreds of high-pressure repairs. She had seconds to make a choice that would determine not just her fate, but potentially the security of the entire NATO operation in the Baltics. Time slowed to a crystalline moment of absolute clarity. Emma could see the operative's path, could calculate their exact arrival time, could feel the mathematics of destruction converging on this single point in the Estonian forest. In that moment, she understood something that 3 years of disgrace and humiliation had taught her. Sometimes saving others required risking everything you had left. But sometimes, just sometimes, there was a third option that nobody else could see. Emma activated a system that the engineers had specifically warned her not to use except in the most dire circumstances, an electromagnetic pulse generator that would likely fry half the XM1296E's own systems but would also disable any electronic device within 20 meters. The pulse rippled outward like an invisible tsunami. The approaching Russian operatives stumbled as their camouflage system failed, suddenly visible in standard tactical gear. The injector device went dark, its self-destruct mechanism disabled along with its control systems. For the next 5 minutes, Emma fought a different kind of battle, a race against time to secure the Russian device before its operators could regroup. Working with the precision of someone who had repaired complex systems under fire hundreds of times, she disconnected the injector from its power source and water supply, rendering it harmless. When the Russian operatives attempted to retake the position, they found themselves facing not just Emma's disabled, but still formidable striker, but the rest of the NATO convoy, which had circled back after losing contact with her. "Phoenix, this is Watchdog. Reinforcements have arrived. What's your status?" Marcus's voice crackled through the partially functioning radio. Emma looked at the disabled Russian device, now secured in a containment unit. She had just prevented what could have been a devastating blow to NATO operations while capturing Technology that would give Allied forces a critical advantage in understanding the new Russian sabotage methods. Watchdog, this is Phoenix. Mission complete. The threat is contained. 4 weeks later, Emma stood in a workshop at Fort Detrick, Maryland, watching scientists in hazmat suits examine the Russian nanomaterial injector she had captured. The device had proven to be even more sophisticated than initially thought, a revolutionary approach to battlefield control that would have changed the nature of modern warfare if successfully deployed. General Howard approached, his bearing noticeably different than it had been a month ago. The Pentagon wants you to know that the Russian sabotage threat in the Baltics has been neutralized. Whatever you did out there, it worked. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They're offering you anything you want, Howard continued. Your own research division, a promotion to Chief Warrant Officer, assignment to any base in the world. Name it, and it's yours. And if I said I wanted to go to Pittsburgh to teach kids who've been written off by the system? Howard smiled, a genuine expression she'd never seen from him before. Then the Army would give you the best letter of recommendation ever written and wish you well. You've earned the right to choose your own path. That evening, Emma drove her pickup truck through the gates of Fort Detrick for what might be the last time. In her rear view mirror, she could see the research labs where they were studying the Russian device, the workshops where she had helped develop countermeasures, the training grounds where she had taught other mechanics to recognize the signs of nanomaterial contamination. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. The kids in Pittsburgh are lucky to get you, but if you ever want to be miracle worker again, just call. Emma smiled and kept driving. She had spent 3 years learning that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty was competence. But she had also learned something else, that being underestimated was a superpower all its own. In Pittsburgh, troubled teenagers would learn to fix things from a quiet instructor who never talked about her past. They would learn that failure wasn't the end of the story, that being written off by others didn't mean writing yourself off. They would learn these lessons from someone who had been called a coward and a quota hire, who had eaten alone in mess halls and cleaned tool rooms as punishment for doing the right thing. Someone who had chosen integrity over career, dignity over revenge, and service over recognition. Someone who had been miracle worker long before anyone gave her that title, and would remain miracle worker long after the last mission was completed. Emma Rhodes drove toward the Steel City with the radio playing and her windows down, finally understanding that the greatest victories aren't always the ones that make headlines. Sometimes they're the quiet moments when you choose to save others, even when those others would never save you. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to let their cruelty change who you are. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the world. But Emma's journey had one more unexpected turn. As she pulled into a gas station near the Pennsylvania border, a black SUV with government plates parked beside her. The window rolled down to reveal a face she hadn't seen in years. Master Sergeant Eliza Washington, United States Marine Corps. It's an honor to finally meet you, Specialist Rhodes. Emma tensed, instantly on alert. Do I know you? Washington stepped out of the vehicle, her uniform immaculate, ribbons and medals covering her left breast. With deliberate movements, she rolled up her sleeve to reveal a tattoo identical to Emma's, the same geometric patterns, the same Latin phrase, the same 12 stars. Truth shines in darkness, Washington said. Softly, I was the intelligence officer who verified your assessment in Iraq. The bomb you refused to approach would have killed not just your team, but 27 local civilians in the surrounding area. Emma stared at the tattoo, unable to form words. There are 12 of us, Washington continued. Men and women, across all branches of service who've made the hardest choice following their conscience, when orders would have led to disaster. We call ourselves the Sentinels. I've never heard of you. Washington smiled. That's rather the point. We operate in the shadows, identifying potential disasters before they happen, making the calls that no one else will make. Your actions in Estonia confirmed what we already knew. You're one of us, whether you wear the tattoo or not. She handed Emma a business card with nothing but a phone number. Your plans in Pittsburgh are admirable. Those kids need someone like you. But when you're ready, if you're ready, there's a place for you with us. No rank, no bureaucracy, just the freedom to do what you do best. See the invisible and protect those who can't protect themselves. Emma slipped the card into her pocket, not committing to anything but not refusing either. Why tell me this now? Because tomorrow, the President is going to award you the Distinguished Service Medal in a private ceremony. There will be speeches about heroism and duty. They'll try to bring you back into the fold, back into a system that once threw you away. Before that happens, I wanted you to know you have another option. One where your tattoo isn't just a reminder of what you lost, but a symbol of who you truly are. As Washington returned to her vehicle, she paused. By the way, you should know those 12 stars on our tattoo. There are now 74 people alive because of your actions in Estonia. 74 stars that would never shine if you hadn't made the choice you did. The SUV pulled away, leaving Emma alone with a decision she hadn't anticipated making. Pittsburgh still called to her, the chance to shape young lives, to build something positive from the ground up. But Washington's words echoed in her mind, stirring something she had tried to bury under 3 years of humiliation and silent service. She looked at her reflection in the gas station window, at the woman who had become so much more than the Army had ever expected her to be. The woman who could see patterns others missed and make choices others feared to make. The choice before her wasn't really about the Army versus Pittsburgh. It was about who she wanted to be, the mechanic who taught others to fix broken machines, or the sentinel who fixed broken systems. Perhaps, she realized, she could be both. The next morning, Emma stood before the President of the United States. In the Oval Office, accepting the Distinguished Service Medal with quiet dignity. General Howard beamed with pride, as if he had personally discovered her potential rather than buried it for 3 years. The nation owes you a debt of gratitude, Specialist Rhodes, the President said, using her lower rank deliberately, a subtle acknowledgement of the injustice she had endured. As the cameras flashed and hands were shaken, a military aide approached with a velvet box. The Secretary of the Army asked me to present you with this as well. Inside was a set of Chief Warrant Officer pins, a promotion that would restore everything she had lost and more. All she had to do was accept. Emma closed the box without taking the pins. Please thank the Secretary for the honor, but I've made other arrangements. Later, as she left the White House, General Howard caught up with her on the steps. Pittsburgh? Or something else? Emma smiled enigmatically. Both, I think. The technical school runs evening classes. That leaves my days free for consulting. Work. Howard studied her face, understanding dawning in his eyes. The Sentinels approached you, didn't they? Washington always was one step ahead of us. You know about them? Only by reputation. They operate outside the chain of command, answerable to no one but their own conscience. They see problems before they become disasters and solve them before anyone knows they needed solving. He paused. It suits you. As Emma walked toward her truck, Howard called after her. Just one question, Rhodes. That tattoo undid. You really get it? Emma rolled up her sleeve, revealing the 12 stars, the Latin phrase, the intricate geometry that had become part of her identity. The day after Iraq, she said simply. The day I learned that sometimes the greatest courage isn't following orders or breaking them. It's knowing the difference. 6 months later, the technical school in Pittsburgh hummed with activity as a dozen teenagers clustered around an engine block. Grease-stained hands moved with growing confidence as they disassembled the complex machinery under Emma's watchful eye. These weren't ordinary students. They were the discards of the education system discipline cases, academic failures, kids with learning disabilities that mainstream classrooms couldn't accommodate. "Remember," Emma said quietly, "every machine speaks its own language. Your job isn't just to fix it. Your job is to listen to what it's telling you." Jamal, a 17-year-old who had been expelled from 3 schools before landing in Emma's program, held up a fuel injector. "Ms. Rhodes, this isn't just clogged. The spray pattern's all wrong. Somebody modified it." Emma smiled. 6 months ago, Jamal couldn't identify a spark plug. Now he was spotting subtle mechanical sabotage that would have escaped most professional mechanics. "Good catch. Why would someone make that modification?" Jamal studied the component with narrowed eyes. "To make it run rich? Waste fuel, maybe? Or," his eyes widened with sudden understanding, "to create a specific failure pattern that looks accidental." "Exactly." Emma nodded, watching comprehension spread across his face. "Some failures aren't random. They're designed to look random." This wasn't just a technical school. It was a training ground for something deeper, teaching these forgotten teenagers to see patterns others missed, to question what looked obvious, to trust their instincts when something felt wrong. Emma was training them not just to be mechanics, but to be observers, critical thinkers, problem solvers. The real lessons happened after normal hours, when the official classes ended and her special curriculum began. By day, they learned mechanical repair. By night, they learned how systems failed and how people failed them. As the students filed out at the end of class, Emma's phone vibrated with a text message. "Sentinel meeting. 2,000 hours, the usual place." The usual place was a nondescript warehouse in an industrial area of Pittsburgh, its exterior suggesting nothing more interesting than storage for machine parts. Inside, however, was one of the most sophisticated technical facilities in the country, funded by sources that didn't officially exist. Emma entered through a side door, her palm scan and retinal identification granting her access to a world few people knew existed. Inside, 11 other men and women, all bearing the same tattoo, gathered around a conference table. Military and intelligence backgrounds from every branch of service, united by a common purpose, identifying threats before they became disasters. Master Sergeant Washington, the informal leader of the Sentinels, activated a display screen. 3 days ago, an American diplomatic convoy in Morocco experienced simultaneous mechanical failures across all vehicles. Official investigation found nothing unusual. But we're seeing the same signature as the Baltic incident. Emma studied the diagnostic readouts, the nanomaterial sabotage. But we neutralized that technology in Estonia. "We neutralized one operation," Washington corrected. "It appears the Russians have shared the technology with other interested parties. This particular operation has Iranian fingerprints all over it." Former Navy Commander Jackson Reynolds, another Sentinel, leaned forward. "The real question is what they were after. That convoy wasn't carrying anything classified." "It wasn't about what the convoy was carrying," Emma said quietly, seeing the pattern emerging in the data. "It was a test run. They wanted to see if the technology would work against hardened diplomatic vehicles with upgraded security features." Washington nodded grimly. "Exactly our assessment. Which brings us to the real problem." She switched the display to show scheduling details for an upcoming diplomatic mission. 3 weeks from now, there's a secret negotiation happening in Tangier. Arms reduction talks that could diffuse tensions across North Africa. If those talks fail, regional war, Reynolds finished, possibly worse. Emma studied the mission parameters with growing concern. "You think they're planning to sabotage the American delegation? Not just the Americans. All parties. Create a mechanical disaster that strands negotiators from multiple countries in hostile territory. Trigger an international incident and watch the peace process collapse." The mission briefing continued for another hour. The Sentinels would deploy in small teams, operating without official sanction or acknowledgement. If they succeeded, no one would ever know there had been a threat. If they failed, they would be disavowed. As the meeting concluded, Washington held Emma back. "There's something else you should know. The Secretary of the Army has been asking questions about you, about why you turned down the promotion, about your consulting work. He's persistent." Emma felt a familiar tension between her public life and her secret one. "What does this mean for the school, for my students?" "It means you need to be careful. The Sentinels have operated in the shadows for 15 years because we've stayed completely off the radar. If the Secretary connects you to us, it could compromise everything we do." That night, Emma sat in her small apartment, staring at the chief warrant officer pin she had refused 6 months earlier. The easy path would be to accept the promotion, return to the Army's embrace, and live a simpler life. Her students would understand. The Sentinels would continue without her. But as she traced the outline of her tattoo, the 12 stars that represented lives saved rather than commendations earned, she knew she couldn't abandon the path she had chosen. Some callings transcended institutional loyalty. Some missions mattered more than recognition. Her phone rang an unknown number, but one she recognized immediately. "Rhodes," she answered. "This is Secretary Davis." The Secretary of the Army's voice was unmistakable, carrying the weight of his office. "I think it's time we had a frank conversation about your extracurricular activities." Emma's blood ran cold. "Sir? Not over the phone." "My office, Pentagon, 0900 tomorrow. A car will pick you up at 0600. The line went dead before she could respond, leaving her with the sinking feeling that her carefully constructed double life was about to collapse. The Secretary's office was exactly what she expected: immaculate, imposing, designed to intimidate visitors with the full weight of military authority. Secretary Davis, a former 4-star general with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, studied her from behind his massive desk. "Specialist Rhodes," he began, deliberately using her lower rank. Or should I say Sentinel? Emma maintained her composure despite the shock. The Sentinel's existence was supposed to be unknown to anyone outside their circle. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to." Davis slid a folder across the desk. Inside were surveillance photos, Emma entering the warehouse in Pittsburgh, meeting with Washington. Even images from Morocco, where she'd helped investigate the diplomatic convoy incident. "For 15 years, Davis continued, I've been aware of a group of military personnel operating outside the chain of command, conducting unsanctioned operations on American soil and abroad. No official records, no accountability, answering to no one. Do you know what we call that in the military, Rhodes?" "A necessity, sir." Her calm response clearly wasn't what he expected. Davis leaned forward. "We call it treason." "With respect, Mr. Secretary, the Sentinels have prevented more disasters than I can count. We intervene when the official channels are too slow or too compromised to act. We've saved American lives. You've undermined the entire military structure." Davis countered. "Every time you operate without authorization, you weaken the very institution you claim to serve." Emma met his gaze steadily. "The institution isn't what I serve, sir. I serve the people who depend on that institution to protect them, even when the institution fails." For a long moment, Davis studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "That's almost exactly what Washington said when I confronted her 5 years ago." Confusion crossed Emma's face. "Sir?" Davis rose from his desk and moved to a side door. "There's someone you should meet." The door opened to reveal a conference room where Master Sergeant Washington sat alongside several high-ranking military officers Emma didn't recognize, and one she did: General Howard. "The Sentinel program," Davis explained as Emma entered, "was never unsanctioned. It was simply compartmentalized at the highest level. Washington stood, extending her hand to Emma. "Sorry for the deception, Rhodes. The final test of a sentinel isn't just skill or courage, it's loyalty to principle over institution. We needed to know you would stand your ground, even against the Secretary of the Army himself." Emma looked from Washington to Davis, struggling to process this revelation. "The Sentinels are an official program?" "Official but deniable," Howard explained. "Established after Iraq, when we realized how vulnerable our systems were to both external threats and internal failures. The tattoo, the secret meetings, the unofficial operations, all carefully constructed to identify people with both the skill to see problems and the courage to act on their convictions. Which brings us to why you're really here," Davis continued, returning to his seat. "Operation Fallen Angel." The name sent a chill through Emma's spine. Davis activated a display screen showing satellite imagery of a remote facility in the mountains of Kazakhstan. 3 months ago, a Russian defector brought us intelligence about a new program, a mechanical sabotage system far beyond the nanomaterial technology you encountered in Estonia. They're calling it Fallen Angel, and it's designed to disable not just individual vehicles, but entire infrastructure systems simultaneously. The images shifted to show testing facilities where vehicles, power systems, and communication networks collapsed in cascading failure. "They've weaponized mechanical failure," Emma breathed, understanding immediately the devastating implications. "A system like this could cripple an entire country without firing a shot." "Exactly," Washington confirmed. "No bombs, no bullets, no attribution. Just critical systems failing in ways that look accidental." Howard added, "The facility in Kazakhstan is where they're perfecting the delivery system. Intelligence suggests they're 2 weeks away from operational capability. After that, it gets distributed to Russian special operations teams worldwide." Emma studied the facility schematics with growing unease. "You want the Sentinels to infiltrate and neutralize it, not the Sentinels," Davis corrected. "Just you." The mission brief was unlike anything Emma had encountered before. She would deploy alone, inserted by high-altitude jump into the mountains surrounding the facility. Her cover, a mechanical specialist contracted to help solve persistent equipment failures. The facility had been experiencing failures, deliberately engineered by American intelligence assets to create the need for outside expertise. "Once inside," Howard explained, "you'll have approximately 72 hours to identify the Fallen Angel system, document its capabilities, and sabotage it in a way that looks like design failure rather than espionage. If you're compromised," Washington added, "standard protocols apply. The United States will disavow all knowledge of your mission." Emma absorbed the details with the focused calm that had become her trademark. "What about my students in Pittsburgh?" Davis smiled slightly. "Already handled. A substitute instructor has been arranged, another Sentinel who's between assignments. Your students won't lose a day of training." As the briefing concluded, Emma found herself alone with Washington. "Why me?" she asked simply. "There are more experienced Sentinels." Washington rolled up her sleeve, revealing her tattoo identical to Emma's except for one detail. Where Emma's tattoo had 12 stars, Washington's had 37. "Each star represents lives saved by choosing conscience over orders," Washington explained. "You have 12 from Iraq, 74 from Estonia, and 6 more from that convoy. In Morocco, 92 stars, Rhodes. More than any Sentinel in the program's history." Emma shook her head. "I never did it for recognition." "That's exactly why it has to be you," Washington said quietly. "This mission requires someone who can see what others miss, who understands mechanical systems at an intuitive level, and who will make the right choice even when every official protocol says otherwise. It requires the miracle worker." 1 week later, Emma parachuted into the mountains of Kazakhstan under cover of a moonless night. The specialized stealth chute deployed silently, guiding her to a landing zone 5 miles from the research facility. The bitter cold bit through her tactical gear as she buried the parachute and began the hike toward her objective. By dawn, she had established a surveillance position overlooking the facility, a cluster of modern buildings surrounded by a double security perimeter, with testing grounds visible to the north. Through high-powered optics, she observed vehicles and equipment being brought into the compound, many exhibiting signs of mechanical distress that would create the perfect cover for her insertion. Emma's legend was detailed and believable. Katerina Volkov, a mechanical specialist of Russian descent raised in Canada, with particular expertise in cold weather equipment failures. Her credentials and background had been meticulously crafted by American intelligence to withstand scrutiny. At precisely 0900, she approached the main gate, her documents and work order in hand. The guards were expecting her, the facilities. Mechanical problems had reached a critical point, with equipment failures threatening to delay the Fallen Angel program. Dr. Volkov, the security chief, greeted her in accented English. "We've been expecting you. The situation has become quite urgent." Emma nodded professionally, slipping effortlessly into her cover identity. "I understand you're experiencing cascading failures across multiple systems. Very unusual. I'll need full access to affected equipment and maintenance records. Of course. Director Petrov is eager to speak with you. The security checks were rigorous but expected." Emma's forged credentials withstood the scrutiny, and the technical questions designed to test her knowledge only demonstrated the depth of her mechanical expertise. By midday, she was inside the facility's main research building, being briefed on the mysterious equipment failures. "It began 3 weeks ago," Director Petrov explained, a thin man with the intense focus of a career scientist. "First the heating systems, then vehicle maintenance, now the test equipment itself. It's as if something is attacking our mechanical infrastructure systematically." Emma recognized the irony immediately. The facility developing a weapon to create systematic mechanical failures was itself experiencing exactly such failures, deliberately engineered by American intelligence. To create her opening, "I'll need to see the affected systems, starting with the most critical," she said. "Of course. Our primary testing facility has experienced the worst disruptions. We have an important demonstration in 2 days that cannot be delayed." As Petrov led her through the complex, Emma carefully mapped the facility's layout, noting security measures and potential extraction routes. The testing facility was a massive hangar-like structure where various vehicles and equipment were arranged around a central control station. "This is where we conduct our primary research," Petrov explained vaguely. But Emma's trained eye immediately recognized what she was seeing. The research involved simultaneous mechanical failure across different platforms' military vehicles, power systems, communications equipment. The Fallen Angel program wasn't just a sabotage technique. It was a comprehensive system designed to create cascading infrastructure collapse. "Most impressive," she commented professionally. "These systems appear to be interconnected for some kind of synchronized testing." Petrov studied her with sudden intensity. "You have a good eye, Dr. Volkov. Yes, we're exploring synchronization across mechanical platforms. Now the primary failures have occurred in the environmental control systems, affecting the precision of our tests." At night, when the facility's staffing was minimal, she slipped through security zones to access the central database, downloading technical specifications and test results. What she discovered exceeded her worst fears. Fallen Angel used a combination of electromagnetic pulses, specialized contaminants, and targeted frequency disruption to create mechanical failures that appeared entirely natural. When deployed, it could disable an entire city's infrastructure from transportation to power, generation to water treatment, without leaving evidence of external attack. On the 3rd day, as she completed repairs on the facility's climate control system, Director Petrov approached with another man-tall military bearing, with cold eyes that missed nothing. "Dr. Volkov, this is Colonel Baranov. He has some questions about your diagnostic approach." Emma recognized the threat immediately. Her cover wasn't blown yet, but suspicion had been raised. She nodded professionally. "Of course. Always happy to explain my methodology." Baranov's questions were technically precise, but laced with subtle traps designed to expose any weakness in her expertise. Emma navigated them flawlessly, drawing on her years of mechanical experience to maintain her cover. "Impressive, Baranov," finally said. "Your reputation is well-deserved. Perhaps you would join us for tomorrow's demonstration. Your insights would be valuable." The invitation was both an opportunity and a danger. The demonstration would reveal Fallen Angel's full capabilities, providing exactly the intelligence she needed. But it would also place her under the scrutiny of the program's entire leadership. "I'd be honored," she replied. That night, as the facility quieted, Emma made her final move. She had documented the Fallen Angel system comprehensively, but her mission required more than intelligence gathering. She needed to sabotage the program in a way that would set it back months without revealing external interference. The central control algorithms were Fallen Angel's heart, the sophisticated programming that coordinated its multifaceted attack on mechanical systems. Emma accessed the facility's main server room using security credentials she had quietly cloned from an unsuspecting technician. Working with the focused precision that had made her legendary among the Sentinels, she introduced a subtle flaw into the system's core programming, not an obvious error that would be easily detected, but a mathematical inconsistency that would cause the system to gradually degrade under stress, creating exactly the kind of cascading failure it was designed to inflict on others. As she completed her sabotage, a soft voice spoke from the doorway. "I knew there was something special about you, Dr. Volkov, or should I say miracle worker?" Emma turned slowly to find Colonel Baranov watching her, a pistol held casually at his side. "The Americans think they're so clever," he continued, "sending their best when we're experiencing mysterious equipment failures. I almost admire the audacity." Emma remained calm, her mind racing through options. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please. Your expertise is genuine. That's what made your cover so effective. But no mechanical specialist pays quite such careful attention to security cameras and patrol patterns." He gestured with the pistol. "Step away from the terminal." Emma complied, her hands raised slightly. "What now, Colonel?" "Now we have a conversation about what you've done to our system, and then you help us fix it. After that," he shrugged, "well, foreign spies don't typically leave Kazakhstan alive. I'm just a mechanical specialist solving the problems I was hired to solve." Baranov smiled thinly. "A specialist who carries a very distinctive tattoo. We know about the Sentinels, Ms. Rhodes. We've studied your operations for years." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. If they knew about the Sentinels, the compromise went far beyond this mission. "The demonstration is in 6 hours, Baranov continued. "You have until then to whatever sabotage you've implemented. After that, we begin removing fingers until you cooperate." He gestured toward the door with his pistol. "Let's go somewhere more suitable for our discussion." As they moved into the corridor, Emma's trained eye caught what Baranov had missed: a minute fluctuation in the overhead lights. A telltale sign of power system irregularity. Her sabotage hadn't just affected the Fallen Angel program. It had created exactly the kind of subtle infrastructure failure the system was designed to produce. "You know what's ironic, Colonel?" she said conversationally as they walked. "You've spent years developing a weapon that creates undetectable mechanical failures, but you miss the signs of one happening right now." Baranov frowned. Another American bluff. The lights flickered once, then failed completely as the facility's power grid suffered a cascading failure. Emergency lighting activated, casting the corridor in an eerie red glow. In the momentary confusion, Emma moved. Years of training with the Sentinels had prepared her for exactly this scenario. 3 precise strikes, and Baranov was unconscious on the floor, his pistol now in her possession. The facility erupted in chaos as systems failed throughout the complex. Security doors operated on electronic locks that defaulted to secure status during power failures, but Emma had studied the building's emergency protocols. She knew exactly which maintenance corridors remained accessible. As alarms blared and security personnel scrambled to secure the fallen angel technology, Emma moved like a ghost through the facility, using her intimate knowledge of its layout to evade detection. The extraction plan called for her to reach a designated point 3 miles from the facility, where a stealth helicopter would perform a high-risk pickup. She had 30 minutes to cover that distance, with the entire security force in pursuit. 28 minutes later, Emma crouched in the designated clearing, listening to the sound of approaching vehicles. The Russian security teams had tracked her more effectively than anticipated, using thermal imaging to follow her trail through the snow. As searchlights swept the tree line, Emma activated her emergency beacon, the signal for immediate extraction regardless of conditions. The response was immediate, the distant thrum of a stealth helicopter approaching fast and low, but the Russians heard it too. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, tracer rounds arcing through the night sky toward the approaching aircraft. Emma made her decision in an instant. The helicopter couldn't land under fire without risking both the aircraft and the extraction team. There was only one way to ensure the mission's success. She moved to the edge of the clearing, away from the extraction point, and began firing Baranov's pistol into the air, drawing the Russians' attention and fire away from the approaching helicopter. It worked. The searchlights and gunfire shifted toward her position, allowing the helicopter to descend rapidly at the far end of the clearing. As she sprinted toward it, zigzagging to avoid the hail of bullets, Emma felt a sharp impact in her left shoulder, a round finding its mark. She stumbled but kept moving, the helicopter now just 20 meters away. The crew chief reached out, grabbing her right arm and hauling her aboard as the aircraft lifted away, still under heavy fire. Package secured. The crew chief shouted over the com as the helicopter banked sharply, deploying countermeasures against shoulder-launched missiles. Emma collapsed against the cabin wall, her mission complete, but her left arm increasingly numb. The crew chief cut away her jacket sleeve to assess the wound, then froze, staring at her exposed arm. "Sir," he said to the pilot, "you need to see this." The pilot glanced back, his eyes widening at the sight of Emma's tattoo, the intricate geometric patterns. The Latin phrase, the 12 stars that had become her identity. "You're a sentinel," he breathed. Emma nodded, conserving strength as the medic worked to stabilize her wound. The pilot touched his own left arm meaningfully. "We all are." For the first time, Emma understood the true scope of the Sentinel program, not just a small group of independent operators, but a network that extended throughout the military, creating a safety net of principled individuals willing to put conscience above career when the moment demanded it. As the helicopter raced toward the extraction point where a medical team waited, Emma thought about the students in Pittsburgh who would be learning mechanical systems from another instructor with a hidden tattoo. She thought about the fallen Angel program, now set back months or years by her sabotage. She thought about patterns that others couldn't see, and choices made in the space between heartbeats. The greatest victories, she had learned, weren't always the ones that made headlines. Sometimes they were the disasters that never happened, the quiet moments when one person's choice prevented catastrophe. Sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply refuse to let cruelty, or power, or ideology blind you to what was right. And sometimes, just sometimes, that refusal became a constellation of stars on your skin, each one representing a life touched, A system fixed, a future reclaimed from the brink of disaster. Truth shines in darkness, even when no one else can. See it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.